No. It's a really good question, and there's not really a good answer for it.
Because I mean, it's kind of everywhere.
Yes.
Ish. Okay, ready?
Yep. Alright, how many of you know who this is? Okay, I expected most of you would recognize Michael Jordan, since according to Forbes, he's had the highest rated Q score among fans since 1987. How many of you know who these guys are? A few of you? A little less? Alright, good. So we've established that most of you know who some of these NBA stars are. I now have one last question. How many of you have thought about basketball and how we got to the point where these NBA players have become recognizable and are household names? Nobody? I didn't expect many of you to answer yes. Even as a huge basketball fan myself and someone who runs a credentialed basketball website, I haven't thought too much about it. So since I was learning things along the way, I actually enjoyed my research, and I'm going to share with you a few of the broad steps in the evolution of basketball. First, we'll start with the creation of the game. Then I'll give you a brief history of the Basketball Association of America and the National Basketball Association. Then finally, I will touch on the NBA and their merger with the ABA. But first, we'll have to go back to a time when basketball hadn't even been invented. You have to go all the way back to the 19th century, December 1891 to be exact, to the last time basketball was not around. Dr. James Naismith, who is known as the father of basketball, came up with the game one rainy day while working as a professor at the YMCA. Naismith's association with the YMCA is why many of them you'll visit today have basketball courts. The funny thing is, according to a YMCA biography on Naismith, he was assigned to a class of misbehaved students who showed no interest in physical education. It's crazy to me to think he managed to create a game that went on to be played and watched by millions just because he was trying to calm down a class of bad kids. Naismith has been quoted as saying, "The invention of basketball was not an accident. It was developed to meet a need. Those boys simply would not play drop the handkerchief." Apparently that was a game back in the day. I probably wouldn't play that myself. The game he created looked quite a bit different than the basketball we are used to today. Soccer balls were used instead of traditional basketball as we know. A peach basket was hung in the gym, and there was no backboard. The basket had a bottom, so whenever a point was scored, somebody had to climb up and get the ball out. The game Naismith invented was a hit with the misfit children and was about to become quite popular in the rest of the world as well. So fast forward to the 1930s and 40s, and basketball's popularity had taken off. There were so many teams and leagues around the nation that formal organizations were developed to help advance the game. That was supposed to push a minute ago. Formed in 1937, the National Basketball League, or the NBL, was the primary organization in professional basketball. Its only real competition came about in 1946, when the Basketball Association of America, or the BAA, was founded. According to History.com, after 3 years of competing against each other, the competition over fans and players had done more harm than it had good for the sport. So a decision was made, and in 1949, the NBL and the BAA merged to form the National Basketball Association. But just because the NBA had been formed, we're still not quite up to present-day NBA just yet. This is where things start to get fun. The NBA enjoyed a run as the big dog in charge of basketball for 18 years with little competition. That is until the ABA, the American Basketball Association, was formed in 1967. If you've ever seen the movie Semi-Pro with Will Ferrell, the crazy antics and wild outfits were loosely based on the ABA. And maybe not quite that loosely. These guys were flashy, both on the court and off the court. And they introduced fancy dribbling, slam dunks, the three-point line that we're used to today in professional basketball. Let me read you a quote from the book Loose Balls by Terry Pluto, which is widely known in basketball circles as one of the greatest books on the ABA. Sex, drugs, platform shoes, sideburns, slam dunks, midnight franchise shifts, $1 million deferred payment player contracts, the three-point shot, pro sports the way they ought to be. Now that sounds more like what you think of when you think of the NBA today, doesn't it? The ABA became so popular with basketball fans that it started taking away crowds from the NBA. 9 years later, in 1967, the NBA merged with the ABA, bringing along a lot of the style of basketball that we know today. So there you have it, a brief history on the evolution of professional basketball. I hope you now have an even better understanding of how we got to the point we are at in present day with the NBA and its players, and I hope I was able to share some interesting facts for you. I know I, for one, am glad that I have the option to play basketball instead of drop the handkerchief. So thank you, Dr. Naismith.
Thankfully, someone got smart and put the full out on the basket.
Yeah.
That was good.
We played a 1.
When did he invent it?
Basketball?
Yeah, what year?
1891.